Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone joining us today for this webinar. We would like to thank Fabiën, Dekker and Helena Schmidt, our invited speakers, the EAGE Special Interest Community on Geoscience Communication and Public Engagement for organizing this event, and all of you for being here. We hope you enjoy the session and learn a lot. And with that, we will begin the webinar. So let me share my screen. So, Eugenia, I hand it over to you.
We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me or?
Yes, now I can
Now
hear
we
you.
can.
Okay, sorry. Sorry for the technical issues. Yeah, I will start then over again. Welcome everyone to the EAGE Special Interest Community on Geoscience Communication Public Engagement webinar with the title Beyond the Reservoir, Why Geothermal Project Fail or Succeed Above the Ground. And we have two speakers, Fabiën Dekker and Dr. Helena Schmidt from Technical University Delft. And my name is Evgenia Martuganova. I'm pleased to be one of the hosts of today's webinar with one of my colleagues, Andrea Cuesta-Cano, who will take over later during the webinar. And also this event is supported by the community manager, Isabella Orsario. Next slide, please. Today's event will be structured as follows. We will have a short introduction about the EAGE Special Interest Communities on Geoscience Communication and Public Engagement. Then we'll have a talk by Fabiën and Helena. The talk will have interactive elements using the Mentimeter, so please prepare your phone so you can participate and answer to the questions throughout the talk. Then the talk will be followed by questions and answers session moderated by Andrea, and we'll have some closing remarks with some announcement about upcoming events and other opportunities. Next slide, please. So the Geoscience Communication and Public Engagement community is a community of geoscientists, educators, and a communicator dedicated to enhancing public understanding of the Earth systems and the role of geoscience in the energy transition. We are a relatively newly established community. The official launch was last year at the EAGE Annual in 2025, and already we have around 400 members on our LinkedIn page, but don't hesitate to join us. You see the small QR code on the right-hand side on this slide to be involved in the future activities, and don't miss any news and opportunities for further events. Next slide, please. Our current committee involves about 12 active members. You can see them now on the screen. And although we have a strong Dutch core, as you can see, we also have some other European participation from Norway, Ireland, France, Italy, and other countries, including also Jordan and Australia. And if you're interested in becoming a member of the committee, don't hesitate to reach out, and it might bring some new opportunities. Next slide, please. And last but not least, I would like to mention some past community activities that we organized. We are actively participating at the EAGE Annual and GET, and we do that through dedicated sessions, panel discussions, and workshops. You can see some examples of these photos. And as well, we provide education, networking events, and collaborations like these webinars that you're attending right now. And I would like to mention also we are open for the collaboration with other communities. So don't hesitate to reach out to anyone from the committee if you would like to organize some collaboration for the event in the future. Next slide, please. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our two speakers, Fabiën Dekker and Helena Schmidt. Fabiën is a doctoral researcher focusing on the role of local community culture in geothermal energy development, with a strong interest in the community engagement and perceptions of the subsurface. And our second speaker, Dr. Helena Schmidt, is a postdoctoral researcher on communication and community perspectives in emerging energy technology, including subsurface application with a broader focus on engaging on a just and widely supported energy transition. With that, I would like to pass the floor to our speakers and start the webinar. Next.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for the lovely introduction and for having us on today. We're very excited to kickstart this first webinar in your new series. So as you heard, the title of today's presentation is Beyond the Reservoir, Why Geothermal Projects Fail or Succeed Above Ground. Could you go to the next slide, please? As has already been mentioned, we would like to do it a little bit interactive. So if you could take your phone right now and scan the QR code or go to the website menti.com and then enter the code, and then you can participate in the questions that we have in the next couple of minutes. I can see people are logging in. It's a very nice turnout, by the way. We're quite pleased to see so many people joining us today. Seems like we've struck a nerve with the subject. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, if you could go to the next slide, please. And yeah, we have already been thoroughly introduced, but let me just mention at this point that we're both working on we're working on two different projects. Fabienne is involved in the Find Heat project, which is an EU-funded project, and my postdoc is financed through the Dutch Research Council through a project called Crossscale. But let's move on to the more interesting part. So you already know who we are, but we are of course also curious to learn who's in the audience. So if you could let us know, please, which sector you work in, so we get a bit of an overview of who's joining us today. I see academia is in the lead so far, but consultancy is catching up. This is quite an interesting distribution. So we have 3 leading sectors at this moment. There's still a couple of people responding. All right, so it seems that quite a few people are working in consultancy or advisory roles, and then almost an equal share are working in academia like us, but also in other energy industries, and only 3 people are geothermal operators. Okay, 1 person from government, public authority, and 2 are other. All right, so with that, let's get started. If you could go to the next slide. Oh, we actually have 1 more question. Starting with a hot take, a bit of a polarizing question. If you could please indicate whether you agree or disagree with this statement. To realize geothermal projects, we need technological solutions more than social considerations. All right, so far the majority is disagreeing, which is a nice surprise. I thought with the more technical audience, there would be more people leaning towards agreeing. Okay, seems like our work is already done. We can stop here. No, I'm just joking. So a couple of people are still not convinced that that social considerations are at least as important as technological solutions, if not more important. So who knows? Maybe by the end of the talk, we will have changed your mind. If you could go to the next slide, please. All right. So for those of you who have already dived a little into the factors that influence the local acceptance of geothermal energy projects, you might have noticed that there's quite a diversity of determinants and different aspects that seem to play a role. And that can be quite daunting and overwhelming. So we're offering you a nice framework to help you structure the most important factors that have an influence on people's community acceptance of projects. This framework has been developed by colleagues from the Medical School Hamburg, and what they've done is they have synthesized all the existing, well, not all, but a majority of the existing papers on the acceptance of wind energy projects, and they have distilled these 5 factors which seem to be affecting local acceptance most strongly, namely impacts on nature and residents, social norms, economic impacts, attitudes towards the energy transition, and planning process. And while this model has so far only been validated as a whole for wind energy acceptance, there are quite some parallels also with the acceptance of geothermal energy projects. So we've taken the liberty to also extend it to the topic of geothermal energy to help you, structure better and help you understand and remember better what the most important factors are. So starting with the first one, if you could go to the next slide. Impacts on nature and residents, and I am thereby handing it to my colleague Fabiën.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to kick off with the first factor, which is impact on nature and residents. Could you please go to the next slide? Okay, I think especially with this audience, we are all well aware of the impacts that geoengineering activities have, such as water contamination, subsidence, potentially induced seismicity, and therefore I don't think I have to elaborate further on this. So if you would like to go, if you can go to the next slide, please. And practical framework to manage these different impacts is the framework of avoid, mitigate, and compensate. So the preferred strategy is avoiding impacts. For instance, with public protests, it can be avoiding it by doing genuine communication or engagement strategies. If avoiding impacts is not possible, the next strategy is mitigating or aiming to reduce the impacts, which can be, for example, seismic monitoring. And if both avoiding and mitigation is not possible, then compensation becomes necessary. It is important to note that compensation is not a substitute for trust. Because we recognize that it's really important to focus more on whether people are heard and whether their concerns are understood by, for example, developers. And on understanding the concerns of local communities can be difficult because these are not, if you can go to the next slide, not easy to show with data. Because the impacts on local communities are impacts on the physical environment, but at the same time also have an impact on their place that has a certain cultural and psychological connection to this. And this is what we capture with the concept of place attachment, which is the emotional and cognitive bond between the people and their place. Can you go to the next slide, please? And in my research, specifically on local culture, we make the distinction between 2 aspects, among others, which is the landscape and the community. For instance, for the landscape aspect, you have the Maori community in New Zealand, and they perceive the Earth as a living mother. And therefore, geothermal energy projects and drilling activities can be seen as disturbing this Earth mother. And similarly, in Chile and Hawaii, the volcanic entities are perceived as living entities, and therefore exploiting the underground is disturbing this. But this is not only the case in outside of Europe, but also in Europe. I think we're all aware of the geothermal plant in Larderello, but in the near region near Mount Amatia in Italy, people perceive geothermal energy completely differently, because here the area is not seen as economic, as is the case in Larderello, but here it is perceived as agricultural, with different kinds of agricultural products, but also a source of natural landscape. And therefore, implementing a geothermal project here caused a loss of sense of belonging for the local communities. And they perceived that there was a loss of biodiversity and natural resources. And these different impacts can shape how the place is perceived, and therefore how they feel attached to this place. On the other hand, we also have the community, which relates to the community identity and the livelihood. For example, in Japan, there is the onsen culture, which are hot springs, and they are part of the cultural heritage in Japan, but also part of the economic backbone. And this causes particularly concerns related to the use of water sources. And in Europe, in contrast to it being an impact that can be negative, there are also positive impacts, because in Cornwall in the UK, the geothermal energy projects are framed as resonating with the mining heritage. And you can also see that illustrated in the picture most on the right, which shows a mining factory or heritage of that, but then also a drilling rig of geothermal energy, and really small also the symbolic flag, the Cornish flag. And so that really shows that geothermal energy has become part of their local place, and there's a certain proudness related to that. So these examples explains that that the impacts on the environment or the nature and residents are not only physical, but also relate to certain attachment to those aspects. And what we often assume is that it's important that the local communities or publics in general understand the underground and the technologies needed for geoengineering activities. If you can go to the next slide. But what other researchers indicate is that it's really important to note that people do not make use of technology to make sense of the underground, or technological information to make sense of the underground, but instead make use of psychological and cultural associations that shape how they perceive the underground. And Lambert and colleagues described this as a two-dimensional model of a type of mental model, how people perceive two tensions between what the underground should be. So they make sense of the underground using, for example, more vague abstractions, or things that are more close to their own activities, such as with mining. And Lambert and her colleagues gave some examples of the different tensions that could be there. And again, go through some of them. For example, the underground can be perceived on the one hand as sacred, or as a devil. On the other hand, and next tension was that the underground is perceived as something having related to knowledge, because we're using it for innovation and scientific discovery, But on the other hand, the underground is also perceived as something, as a mystery, and that should not be disturbed. And there is a reason why we cannot see the underground, and we know that there are layers, but we cannot really visualize that and physically see what is going on under there, and therefore there's a certain tension between whether we should use it or not, for example. Some other tensions are whether it's a threat, for example, it's seismicity, or whether it's safe and stable. And the underground holds, of course, the past, but on the other hand, it also holds potentially the future. So it's important to note that for doing research on public perceptions, to be aware of the fact that the underground is not an empty space for people, but they already have certain psychological and cultural associations to the subsurface. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And with that, we discussed the first factor, which is impact on nature and residents, and we're going to continue with the economic impact by my colleague, Helena.
Yes, thank you, Fabienne. If you could go to the next slide, please. First, we're curious to hear your opinion. If you could please vote on the following statement. On average, does geothermal energy have a positive or a negative impact on the local economy where a project is developed? So far, positive seems to be the favored response. Okay, seems to be a very one-sided answer. Okay, we have one person who voted negative. Okay, yeah, I think it's safe to say that the vast majority thinks that on average, geothermal energy projects have more positive than negative impacts on the local economy. But let us see if that is really the case. If you could go to the next slide, please. Because if you look at it more closely, you will see that geothermal energy projects can deliver both benefits as well as risks for local economies. So some of the benefits that I've listed here are obviously the creation of new jobs, improved energy access and security, and also the supply of heat for agricultural purposes, for example. However, projects can also entail certain risks, such as the risk of land grabbing and the displacement of residents, a reduction in natural springs that are used for agricultural or business purposes, like thermal baths, for example. And projects can also decrease property values. We've seen that in some regions where subsurface activities have led to an increase in induced seismicity as well as land subsidence. And then there's also the case of tourism, which is a very interesting one to look at because it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, tourism has direct benefits, at least in some cases. Geothermal energy projects has direct benefits for tourism in some cases. For example, in the shape of energy tourism, which is a relatively new form of tourism where people seek out regions that have, a high density of renewable energy developments or that feature unique renewable energy plants. And this is kind of offers a combination of entertainment as well as education. So it can be combined with like physical activities like hiking and cycling, or you have paths with information, science, or visitor centers. One example you will see in the bottom left in the picture. So this is a geothermal power plant in Iceland that is also capitalizing on the tourist attraction of the plant by offering a guided tour through a visitor center nearby. And then there are also indirect benefits for tourism from geothermal projects, such as the supply of heat for space as well as pools, as you can see in the bottom right picture. So this is a spa in Iceland also, where they're using wastewater from a nearby geothermal plant. And it's quite a popular tourist destination. On the other hand, there are also certain risks for tourism. So research has been done on Iceland because it has already a pretty high density of geothermal energy plants, but there's also still a lot of potential for further development. And they have surveyed tourism providers, and they have found that quite a lot of them are scared of the effects on the natural landscapes that are key to nature-based tourism. At the same time, a related study also found that while these risks are existing and they're also perceived as such, they tend to be somewhat lower for geothermal energy when compared to other types of renewables like hydropower and wind energy, because hydropower and wind energy have a significantly higher impact in terms of visibility compared to geothermal energy. If you could go to the next slide. So in recent years, we have also seen that project developers increasingly offer monetary or in-kind benefits to local communities where projects are placed. So this is not just the case for geothermal, but all sorts of renewable energy projects. And some of the reasons that developers are doing this is to overcome opposition or to account for damages and adverse project impacts. Some are also generally interested in a fairer distribution of the profits, and others are simply complying with existing regulations or expectations that the local community may have towards the developer. But it's important to keep in mind that benefits are not a panacea. So if you are using benefits, you should do so in a fair and meaningful way. And I'll go into more detail later what that means specifically. If you could go to the next slide. Okay, so moving on to another factor, which is people's attitude towards the energy transition, which has also been shown to play quite an important role when it comes to project acceptance. Next slide, please. So you might ask yourself, why is it important what people think about the energy transition? Well, the reason it's important is that research shows that people who support the energy transition are also much more likely to accept renewable energy, both in general as well as at a local scale. And they're also more likely to invest in renewable energies if they're in favor of the energy transition. And this has also been shown specifically for geothermal projects, where it has been found that energy transition supporters are more likely to endorse local projects compared to people who are less supportive of the energy transition. So I think an important question that anyone who is involved in developing a project should ask themselves is the project seen as part of the broader energy transition, or is it seen as an isolated development? Next slide, please. Then the fourth factor, which plays a crucial role when it comes to project acceptance, are social norms. Moving on to the next slide. So what I mean by social norms, those are formal or informal rules that govern behavior within groups or societies. So we're all adhering to social norms in one way or another as we are part of groups or society at large. And the reason that this matters when it comes to energy acceptance is that social norms can substantially influence debates about renewables and specific energy projects. Because we know that opponents tend to be much more active and vocal than supporters of energy projects. And we think that is because when people have something to lose, they're much more motivated to stand up for themselves and to act on their opinion than when people have something to gain. And that's why opponents who are afraid of the damage, so to speak, that the project could do to their local environment are more likely to stand up for their belief and to resist than people who are maybe neutral, feel neutral about it, or maybe even supportive. Because gains are less motivating than losses. This is like a well-established finding in the social sciences. At the same time, it's often the case that the opponents are in the minority, but because they're very vocal and very outspoken about their beliefs, it can create the impression that they're actually the majority and they're representing a majority opinion, and can thereby shift the local debate, because then the people who are maybe okay with the development or even like it, but they're not speaking up, then they start to think, oh, am I the only one who's in favor? Maybe there are good reasons to be against it and I should be against it too. Media can also play an amplifying role in this, because as we all know, there's a negativity bias in media. So media tends to pick up on negative stories that invoke feelings of anger or anxiety much more often than positive stories. And this can further amplify sort of the frustration or the anxiety that exists around a proposed project. And furthermore, media also tends to be very event-driven. So, for example, if there's a local protest, they will likely pick up on that, and thereby further increasing anxieties and concerns. This has also been seen in places where there have been incidents with geothermal energy projects, such as Korea. So there was an earthquake due to an enhanced geothermal system in Pohang, and researchers did a media analysis where they compared the media coverage of geothermal energy before and after the incident, and they noticed that after the incident it was substantially more negative and much more risk-based than before. So it's important to keep in mind how these social dynamics affect local debates, but also national debates around specific projects as well as the entire technology. Okay, moving on to the next slide. And I hereby hand it back to my colleague, Fabiën.
Yes, thank you. Before we dive into the final category, I would like to ask you to answer the question, what concerns arise in geothermal debates that go beyond the project itself? Examples of these concerns could be the perceived trust, for example, related to other projects, or the local politics that shape how people perceive these projects. Or relating it, for example, to other technologies. I think that's a very nice example, already aligned with what Helena said about the Pohang earthquake, or in Switzerland, a lot of spillovers from fracking to, for example, geothermal. I'm aware of that people sometimes consider CO2 emissions. The perceived link, that others have more benefits than I have. Nice. Visual impacts related to it. Can you scroll down a bit? Can I read what's underneath? The availability of fresh drinking water. Yes, that's also specifically in specific areas where maybe there are limited water resources, for example, or water sources, or whether the focus specifically is on that. Okay, thank you very much for all these different concerns that arise in geothermal debates that might go beyond the project of geothermal itself. Some of them are impacts related to it, but some of them are for example, technologies that do not relate with geothermal energy. And what is often important to consider is that when implementing a project, it is not implemented into a blank slate. Instead, there has been often projects or infrastructures before that impact or that shape how new projects will be perceived. Can you go to the next slide? And that is what we're focusing on in the final category, which is the planning process. If you can go to the next slide. Because this concerns that are not related to projects is what Kuppen and her colleagues call the controversy spillover. And they categorize those spillovers in 3 main categories. And I will go through them. So first of all, you have the geographical spillover, where the perception of a technology travels from one place to another. An example of that is the proposal of a shale gas project in the Netherlands, where people were unaware of what shale gas was. So they looked it up on the internet and they found a documentary in America. And there were, in this documentary, there were videos showing that the drinking water was contaminated with shale gas and that you could put the drinking water on fire. And this stopped, this perception then spilled over from one area to another. And therefore also the project was in the end stopped and not implemented. Another type of spillover is the technology spillover. This is when, for example, with fracking, which also you gave as an example, is found in the UK to impact the perceptions of geothermal energy. Even though the researchers, Westlake and his colleagues, emphasized the difference between fracking and geothermal energy, still people perceived geothermal energy as bad, as having negative impacts related to seismicity, and also this increased distrust in the stakeholders involved. And so here the perception of one technology spills over to another. And the final one is the historical spillover, which relates to the fact that a region has certain projects before, and then this impacts how they perceive new projects. And an example of this is by Chavot and his colleagues, focusing on the Alsace region in France. And they compare different regions. And in one region, they found that geothermal was really perceived as part of their local identity, because making use of the underground is in their DNA. While in Strasbourg, it was the case that they already had experience with an oil port, where they really tried to contest it, and they tried to make the developers aware of the different risks associated to it. But because they felt like their concerns were not heard, this also caused the fact that they did not want a geothermal plant after years, because they have had the experience of the contested oil port, but their concerns were not heard. So they were afraid that also this will be the case for the geothermal energy plant. So it's important to consider those types of spillovers that might impact how the planning process can be perceived. If you can go to the next slide. So it's important to think about the planning process, because research has consistently showed that when communities perceive the planning process as fair, this also increases the acceptance of the project. And it is not the case that people then stop having concerns, but they at least have the feeling that they have been heard, and that the developers listen to them. And this can be done by different type of engagement strategies, as is shown with the diagram. And there are a full spectrum of different engagement strategies. but these are not mutually exclusive and should be implemented in different phases of the project. But the direction does matter, because with that you can have the 3 critical conditions for genuine engagement achieved, which is first of all to be transparent, so inform about risk, the uncertainties, the probabilities of certain impacts. Second, it's important to be a trusted actor, so to act honestly, involve people early, and finally, it's also important, the third condition is to also empower people and have people have real influence. So instead of only involving them, also not only having them to react to decisions, but also have an influence on the decisions with empowering methods. And these strategies only work if it is a genuine involvement and not if the engagement is only being done as a tick boxing exercise. And has been found with research, it is important that the actors involved are trusted, because if the actors involved are being trusted, then this will also increase the public support. And with that, I would like to say that it's important to not only being more active in communicating better, but also to listen better. And with that, we would like to continue to the implications with Helena, who's going to take that final part.
Yes, thank you, Fabienne. So if you're thinking at this point, oh wow, that's a lot of information, but how do I actually put all of that into practice? Don't worry, we have made an overview slide for you, distilling what we think are helpful implications for practice from the research findings we just told you about. So first of all, when you're developing a project, make sure that you embed it into the bigger picture. So that could mean communicating why the energy transition matters and also how this particular project contributes to it. But be careful if you know that you're developing a project in a region where people are very critical of the energy transition, then it's actually better not to lay this link and to focus on another bigger picture instead, which could be, for example, local, regional, or national economic policies or development strategies or strategies for tourism and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is make sure that the project is not seen as an isolated development, but as puzzle piece of a bigger puzzle. Then the second implication is work with the social dynamics and not against it. You will always have a couple of opponents, and they probably also have very valid reasons to be opposed against the project, as we just heard. There are all sorts of reasons why people could be against it. Maybe they've had a bad experience with past projects, or maybe they're concerned about certain impacts on for example, the value of their property, or induced seismicity, water pollution, noise pollution, whatnot. So do take these concerns seriously and also see what you can do about them, if you can find maybe a sort of compromise. But at the same time, also keep an eye on the so-called silent majority, who might actually be in favor of the project, and try to actively engage them as well, because those are usually the people that will be less involved, as I explained earlier, because they don't have anything to lose, so they're usually more in the background. But if you actually include them in the planning process as well, this can help you too, because then you can identify also positive emotions that people associate with the project, and maybe you could emphasize how the project connects to the local identity. Fabienne gave an example earlier of a town, former mining town in the UK, where they now have geothermal energy, which is actually in line with their local identity as being a prosperous town relying on subsurface innovation. And then also what Fabienne said, recognize that for people, the underground is not just this empty space, this vacuum that's completely disconnected from their place and their environment, but they actually associate a lot of different things with it. So be mindful of those associations as well, and what kind of things the project might trigger in people because of the existing meaning that it has for them. Then the third point is if you're considering to work with community benefits, which is highly advisable because there's a strong link between community benefits and higher project acceptance. But if you do so mindfully and thoughtfully. So the first step is to actually map who are the affected stakeholders. So don't just think of, the next door neighbors, but maybe also people in other parts of the community that feel like they're impacted by the project as well. Then understand what their priorities are and tailor the benefits to the local context. And also be transparent about why you're giving out community benefits and to what extent and who's benefiting in what way. And then very important to also mention that benefits are not like this standalone mechanism that can, help you garner all the support that you need. No, they need to be embedded in wider genuine engagement, as Fabienne was just explaining. And they should not be used to compensate for a flawed planning process or for unmanaged adverse impacts. Then lastly, it's important to plan for a meaningful participation throughout the project so that you start early on, informing people about your plans, gathering residents' input, but that the engagement doesn't stop there, but you continue it throughout all the project phases. So that also includes the construction, the operation, as well as the decommissioning. And it should always be a two-way dialogue and not just one-sided, you giving out information, but also you actually listening to people and engaging in an honest conversation. And I think active listening is the key here. Okay, next slide.
Okay, and with that, we would like to bring to your attention the acronym given by our colleague Gerdien de Vries for aspects to consider when engaging with local communities. I think the core message here is that it's important to understand the concerns of the local communities, to really engage with them through the whole project, and to keep in touch. So with that, we would like to thank you. Oh, you can go to the next slide for the references. And with that, we would like to thank you for your attention, and we look forward to hear your questions.
Thank you a lot, girls, for this amazing presentation and for introducing us for also the social aspects that normally we forget as technical people, but they actually might play a greater role in the decision making that we would actually like to accept. So thanks a lot for bringing us all these points. And I would encourage the audience that if you have any questions, please to write them on the chat, so we can now discuss in the last 10 minutes a bit about them. And I have here a question from Lucy Yanku. Maybe if you want, Lucy, you can ask yourself. Maybe it's easier to elaborate. Otherwise, I hear noise. Well, otherwise, I will.
Okay, sorry, maybe it's too noisy here. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, Lucy, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So my question was just about the really actively involving the public, which is something I can't really tell like how to do when all the decisions are highly technical and require highly technical knowledge. So since we can't really consult the public about a well trajectory or pumping rates, then what it is that the public can actually be involved in so that they feel like empowered without doing too much damage to the actual project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're raising a very important point. I think a lot of developers are also wary that projects are too complicated for the average person to understand. But I think you will see that if you prepare the engagement carefully and you try to communicate in, you know, very simple, accessible language, that most people will be able to follow at least, you know, sort of the bigger lines of the project. That said, yeah, the sort of decisions that the public can really make depends a lot on the specific projects. Also a lot on the regulatory framework that you have in the given country. So yeah, it's I cannot really give you sort of a blanket statement. There's not like a one size fits all approach. I think you will see that you really need to tailor it to the specific project and the context. I think one thing that I can say is that it's always important to be very transparent about how much people can actually decide. Because if you give them the impression that they can, you know, they can decide everything, they can sort of call all the shots, then they will be disappointed at the end, and that will lead to frustration, and then this whole thing actually backfires. So from the very start, be very transparent about what is it that people can actually influence. And I mean, I'm in my past research, I've been more focused on wind energy. And for wind energy is, for example, the case that people sometimes want to chip in when it comes to the location. So that they're saying, oh yeah, we're okay with wind energy, but we'd rather have it there and not here. Sometimes it's possible for them to influence a decision, sometimes not, again, depending on the local context and the regulations. But a lot of times also small changes will make people feel heard and seen. So for example, with wind energy, you could then, for example, say, okay, instead of having 6 turbines, we only have 5 turbines, if that reduces the impact it has on the landscape. But maybe, Fabienne, you can give more concrete examples for geothermal, because you're more focused on geothermal than me.
I think one of the nice examples is the trucks, because there's a lot of nuisance related to trucks going through neighborhoods. And research has shown that when local communities can decide what the route is of a truck, and that it goes, for example, not via the route where the school children are going in the morning, those kind of things are things that people would like to have a say in, and in that way have, for example, the trucks choose a different route to the geothermal plant with, for example, the drilling pipes, which are, of course, meters long. I think that's one example.
Yeah, and I see, Lucy, that someone also gave some more suggestions in the chat, so maybe that's worth checking out as well.
Great. Next, we can move to the next question. Thank you, Lucy. Arndt, maybe you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, I can. I mean, it's really a twofold question. One is, who is actually instigating the public engagement? Meaning, is it the remit of a politician? Is it related to the effort of the operator who wants to kick off a project? And then what cost levels are we talking about? Because there's a lot of cost involved in drilling a well in geothermal. It's a lot higher investment, and therefore lower margins, if you will, than putting up even a wind turbine, or even more so a solar panel, a photovoltaic panel on your house. So I think it's key to understand what it takes in terms of investment in public engagement. Do you have any figures on that?
To answer your last point, no, I don't. I know it can be quite costly, but it also depends on how you go about it. Like if you do it all in-house, or if you outsource it to, you know, like a consultancy or communication bureau who organizes the participation trajectory for you, then of course the latter will be more expensive. Regarding your first question, like who should be in charge? Well, from what I've seen is that it's usually the project developer who takes initiative, but obviously they also involve the local administration in designing and conducting the participation process, because in most cases the local administration also plays a very important role when it comes to, you know, permitting the project and the spatial planning and whatnot. So usually it's sort of done in collaboration, so that, you know, local administration can also help you with organizing events, for example, in the locality, you know, renting spaces, sending out invitations, making advertisement, giving you access to maybe the community bulletin where you can advertise these sort of events.
Yeah, if I may add to this, I think there's a little bit related to framing as well, because we know that other industries like the oil industry, they're putting lobbyism forward in order to push projects through, and you don't want to come into the rounds of okay, we are just paying for getting support. It's a different framework that is needed for this one in order to win over the public, I would say, because, and I think one of the things I mentioned earlier, in some places it's just there's an operator, yes, geothermal is a byproduct, but they're really after lithium, and the public shouldn't see it that way. It should be in the benefit of the public to support the projects, because they will reap the energy or the heat that comes from it, rather than the lithium that goes into a private pocket.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to judge these cases, of course, if a developer has like ulterior motives.
I think that the cases in the UK, I think the Eden and the United Downs projects are projects where also, correct me if I'm wrong, lithium recovery is combined with geothermal energy. And I think these projects are really nice cases that also show how public engagement is executed, but also how the Eden project is related more to the area with the bulbs kind of forms, and there it really shows that it causes a certain proudness related to it, and also the public engagement had certain websites focusing on small figures and cartoons. That could make it also understandable for the local communities. And I think those things are also very valuable, not only focusing on compensation, but also understanding that the local community understand it, but also that you understand that your project is in a certain local environment.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Nice, good. Now, to end up in a good note, we have still 2 questions, so I'm gonna quickly read them, and if Fabiën or Helena, you could give a 1 sentence, 2 sentence answer to them, then we can cover all the questions that have been posted already. So first one, Jab Mont asks, are you willing to use social media like TikTok to provide a response to correct technically incorrect information, as it might require a lot of time and effort? So misinformation and social media.
Yeah, maybe I'll take this one and then Fabiën can focus on the second question. So my short answer is the content should fit the format. So yes, social media is an important tool that you can definitely use in your favor in, you know, engagement efforts, but there's only so much you can do through social media. So I think if you're trying to correct for misinformation, that is better done in a personal formats and not through social media. But you can use social media, for example, to reach hard to reach target audiences, like younger people who usually don't read the community bulletin and don't know that there's a town hall meeting taking place next week Friday. So this is a way that you can use social media, making people aware of what's going on and moments of engagement and, you know, how to access them.
Great, thanks. And the last question is from Edgar Hernandez. At which stage of the project should we start engaging with the community, and what are the means that we could use?
Okay. For the final question, I think it's important to start as early as possible. That can be during the exploration phase, where you're focusing already on geothermal exploration, but then also seeing whether it fits, for example, with the local environment or the local culture related to it, and whether you could whether the local communities perceive this, for example, as disturbing the underground, but then also during the planning process, how should it work and who should be the heat or electricity provided to. Then also during the permitting phase, that you then also go through different types of consultations and also different versions of engagement. Does this answer the question?
We hope so. And then maybe just a closing up. We have a lot of geoscientists here. What do you think it would be our role as geoscientists in this engagement?
Is that a question to us?
Yeah, in general, what can we do as geoscientists to be in part of the engagement and to be in discussions with the community ourselves?
Well, I think that depends very much. Oh, sorry. Are we supposed to answer the audience, because I heard someone speak up?
You as social scientist, what would you recommend us to do?
Okay, yeah. So I think this depends a lot on the function that you have, whether you work in academia, research, consultancy, industry. But I would say in general, so if you're not working directly on projects, what you can still do to help support a better community engagement around geothermal energy projects is that, for example, when you disseminate information, that you do it in a way that is very accessible and like tailored to a general audience, so that this information can also be used to inform people as part of engagement activities. So that would be one suggestion. And of course, also keep in mind the social impacts when you're doing research or when you're doing exploration and when you're doing impact assessments. Don't just focus on, what the technical ramifications are, but also like what all the things that we were telling you about, like how does it affect local communities and how can local communities get something out of the project as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, girls. Thank you for this very insightful talk. I hope the audience also enjoyed it. And just for the closing, we would like to give you a couple of reminders. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this webinar was organized by the Geocommunication community, but of course it's very close to another one of the communities in EAGE, which is a geothermal energy one. So if you don't know it and you would be interested also in a more technical set of talks and events, we encourage you to sign up and be up to date with all their events. And if we can go to the last slide, we will also want to remind you that as Geocommunication and Public Engagement community, we are also going to be present in EAGE Annual in June. And there we are going to have an event the 9th of June, which is titled Attracting Talent to Geoscience, How Industry Can Help Save the Next Generation. So if you are also interested in this topic, I hope you can all make it and make your contribution with your thoughts and learn how we can create a greater community together. And with all that, thank you, Fabiën and Helena, for the talk. Thank you, EAGE, for allowing us to organize this talk. And thank you, everyone in the audience, for listening and participating so actively. See you next